is Hassan Jaffer with world predictions for 2022. We have quite an exciting year coming up, and I'll deal with planets in different signs also, the long-term, the short-term things, and there's some major revolutions coming up. And I'm not going to just deal with just individual people, all that. I might mention them also, but I want to see the world trends, where this world is headed. Now, there's a major theme that's coming up on January the 21st of 2024. When Pluto moves in the sign of Aquarius. Now, this hasn't happened for 246 years, so it's the first time we're experiencing it. Aquarius is a sign for all the astronomy and robots and electronics and digital technology. So we are coming into a major revolution at that time, and it's heading up towards it. Right now, Pluto is in the sign of Capricorn for the last number of years, where the governments were changing, and it'll become like virtual government at that time, and crypto will become standard everywhere all around the world. The virtual partners, and that's the time when Elon Musk, when you want to have a link between computers and the human mind, I think there'll be some major progress at that time. Now, all of that has already started with Jupiter being in the sign of Aquarius in 2020. It started it. And then, so that was a real luck element. And Saturn being in Aquarius, that really helped to solidify it and make it very practical. So a lot of things like, for example, Facebook going into Meta, very much like Second Life. So that's already started. And with Neptune being in the sign of Pisces, the sign of music, of humanitarian themes, you'll see many of the holographic concerts coming up also. And there's another theme that's happening, that Jupiter is moving into Pisces. I'll give the dates a little later on. Let me actually show you a reference from my astro calendar. This is the personalized website we give to anyone who wants to subscribe for a year. So here are the world events, and I've color-coded it. So here's Jupiter, it's a 12-year cycle. And it's going into Pisces at the end of December, on 29th of December. By the way, today, there was news about thousands of passengers being stranded because of flight disruptions and cancellations. And here's the planet Mars in the sign of Sagittarius when I'm doing this chart today. And here's the interpretation right here. And you can see it. Right there, it says disruptions in air travel and flight cancellation. That's part of this Mars being the sign of Sagittarius. So the digital technology is all this Aquarius color. This color that you see, what I've done is instead of having all these numbers and words, the visual is 75,000 times faster than words or numbers. And below this, we've given the meanings. For example, so here's Aquarius, all the global community and the social media and the futuristic, all the space programs, etc. All that's there. So here's Jupiter, which is the luck element in this aspect, and it's going in the sign of Pisces. Now, as it moves into the sign of Pisces, this is the analog technology. So throughout 2022, Jupiter is in the sign of Pisces, along with Neptune in the sign of Pisces. This is the most humanitarian that you'll ever see. And certain days when Moon also goes into the sign of Pisces, here's the Moon, and that becomes even more so. Now, another thing about Pisces is the sign of ocean, so the flooding and all that you can also expect. But this is the chart of Steve Jobs. He was a Pisces with Aquarius planets with Mercury in a sign of Aquarius. So the Pisces Aquarius is like the rainforest. It's also the combination of analog and digital technology. And this is happening throughout 2022 and starting right from January. So it's a fantastic era, and they'll continue for quite some time. Now, all the crypto is also the Bitcoins and all that. For example, all the crypto is Aquarius theme as well. Now, let me take you to 2024. So here's 2024, if I go to January, and you'll see that here's Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, and then it goes into sign of Aquarius. Exactly on 21st of January, where the sun goes into Aquarius every year, Pluto will be there once in 246 years. This is where you can expect all the robots as partners and judges and lawyers and even teachers. The thing which is missing with the computers is that, you see, our brain is digital, all the neural activity, potential difference between the sodium and potassium, but it's a binary signal, just like computers. But our senses, people think of 6 senses, but we have over 36 senses in our body. So the touch and all that, like when you drink water, for example, you feel it in the tummy, that's also, or the vertigo, for example, or the centrifugal force. There are many, so over 36 senses in a human body. So what will happen as Jupiter is in the sign of Pisces, we'll have the analog part being added, the sensory part in many of the computers, or with robots. So they feel things or they see things, and how they're now the actual processing is all binary, but there'll be sensory things, which is all analog. This is the analog part. And in January, you will see this a lot as Jupiter moves in the sign of Pisces. you can see that all of January is. So this is the beginning of it, of the combination of analog and digital. So the analog is a sensory part of it. It's like the record industry, for example, as opposed to CDs where you have weighted A scale, you'll have the records, the old-fashioned records, for example, coming back. That's all this part. And Saturn, being the sign of Aquarius, is one of the most inventive themes and is practical, inventive ideas. Now, Uranus being in the sign of Taurus, this is the sign of Taurus, and this all the old structures and all the traditional things, for example, are being converted into virtual. Whether you have, you want to visit the Louvre, for example, in virtual reality, you're watching this whole thing. That's all Uranus being the sign of Taurus. All the old structures and everything are being modernized and put in the virtual space. And also, Taurus is a sign for currency and real estate. So the virtual real estate trips, but also the virtual currency. So this is where the crypto thing, I predicted this thing. When Uranus went in the sign of Taurus, it's an 84-year cycle actually. So Uranus being the sign of Taurus. Taurus is all the currency, old-fashioned way or doing it, and a very stable type, like you can actually handle it, but it's all becoming virtual. That's all Uranus. So Uranus is the modern part of it, just like Aquarius theme, and Taurus is an old-fashioned theme. So when you combine the two, you're taking the old things and bring them into the modern, so the crypto as opposed to normal banking. Now you can also feel the energy of just by looking at these colors. For example, here's Mars in Sagittarius, continues throughout January till the 24th of January. This is all the disruptions in flights and also the stock market being very volatile throughout this period. And right after that goes into the sign of Aquarius, the sign for government. So the major government shakeups at that time. But you can see so many planets going into Capricorn. And again, all the authority. This is the last of the COVID themes and all that, and people trying to impose, the government's trying to impose these authority. You can see all these brown parts, all the hard work, material themes and all that. But there's a positive aspect that all these Pisces planets is a water sign, and then all these earth. So earth and water is like a rich healer, or the healing part is all the Pisces, and the Capricorn part is all the material part of it. And then when you go into March, you can see the crypto again going up. So this is all the Aquarius part. So here's March, and then it goes into all the ocean and the hurricanes and storms. That's all the Pisces part. Then goes into Aries. As soon as it goes to Aries, and you can see the colors changing there, but it's a very short period. Then this pink that you see, this is all Taurus. Taurus is all currency, material things, blue chip investments, and along with all the Pisces planets, there's a very harmonious aspect. Planets in Taurus, in Capricorn, and Pisces. All the earth and water, they go very well together actually. Very nurturing element throughout this period. So there's a lot of psychic boom at that time. But the ocean part is still there. Then it comes to all this Aries that you see, this red themes, especially when Mars moves into that. Now, in the months of March and April, you will see a lot of the hurricanes and these themes, flooding and all that, because Mars and Neptune. Now, there'll be many scandals also throughout this period, of the drugs things and the scandals and all, because Mars and Neptune, this is an addictive aspect, a lot of mental stress around the world. And it affects certain people, certain age group, which I'll come to a little later on. So especially the Mars aspect, Mars and Neptune both being in Pisces, that's a definite aspect of both the drugs, major drug busts, but also in the ocean. And then it moves into the sign of Aries, which is military actions and all that. Now this seems to be around late May and the month of June, you see it a lot. Now here's a lot of activity, physical activity, when both Mars and Jupiter are in the sign of Aries. The stock market really goes up at that time, becomes very, not volatile, but really upbeat and very impulsive in this aspect. Then moves into, and just try to recognize these colors. If you do subscribe to our Astro Calendar, this is all part of that, by the way. You have personalities of the people. You have a lot of things there that we've given out, your forecasts, but the world aspect, even which movies to watch. Now, Jupiter moves into sign of Aries. That's that red color. As you can see right on the 11th of May of 2022, it moves from Pisces to Aries, from the poet to the pioneer. So here's where all the new things will be coming up. Some fantastic cars and all that. You see, especially with Venus is there, then Mars goes into it late May. And this is where you'll find some really fast cars and, speed records being broken, for example. Because Olympic athletes are born with Mars, Jupiter. So it's a very exciting aspect, very physical aspect. Before, when it's in Pisces, it's more very romantic and ocean and all these type of themes and the crowdfunding and these type of things. But when it goes to Aries, that's the action time. So people become like gamblers and very impulsive also in this aspect. Throughout the month of June, when planets are in Aries, by the way, there's certain people who are affected. For example, when it goes to Aries, so end of May and the month of June, when Mars and Jupiter, everything is in Aries, the signs of Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn will become much more aggressive and physical also that time. But it's a good time for, physical action and cars and aviation records being broken, for example. Those type of things. The only thing is, at that time, the military aspect becomes very rough at that time also, and threatening for nuclear things and all that. Nuclear, I don't see it happening at all. But the military actions, they have to be very careful in the month of May, and like NATO, Russia, and all these things, for example, till about the beginning of July. And then in July, throughout the month of June especially, the month of July, June is a month which is critical for all the military actions, actually. In July, Mars moves in a sign of Taurus, so the banking industry and anything which has to do with real estate, land, property will be affected at that time. That's that Mars. It puts that action and hassles and also in that time. So Jupiter is in Aries all that time. Then briefly it moves into Pisces again in October, end of October of 2022, on the 28th of October. So whatever we've been experiencing now, or the beginning of 2022, we'll again experience the same thing. So again, the crowdfunding, the holographic concerts, for example, is a very strong possibility of holographic concerts that time actually. So end of October, Jupiter moves into Pisces back again, and very humanitarian. A lot of people will have a lot more empathy and compassion and feelings in the film industry. It's like the film aspect as opposed to CDs and records, and all that will be back. Like a real magical aspect actually. And because Saturn is in Aquarius, so we are taking the analog part and the digital part at the same time. So we are making like a film-like quality on the desktops, for example. And there'll be some new technology being developed throughout that period. Now, Jupiter moves back into Aries in 21st December of 2022. So going back from Pisces to Aries. And as soon as it goes to Aries, again, it's a very positive, dynamic, new inventions and pioneering aspects, they all come up at that time. Now, these were just the planets, long-term planets, especially with that Neptune being the sign of Pisces. When Uranus was in Pisces the last day, I predicted that the first of that is once in 84-year cycle, that in the beginning and the end of that cycle, we'll have the tsunamis. And the first time we had the Sumatra, then we had the Japan tsunami. On the last day, the next day, my other prediction came true, which was the nuclear explosions when Uranus moved into Aries. But now it's in Taurus. So all the nuclear aspect, the danger is gone. And Taurus is signed for banking industry and real estate. So that's completely going through a complete transformation. In the banking, of course, is the crypto that's coming up. It's going to become a national thing everywhere, all around the world. All the nations will take that as a normal currency, actually. So throughout 2022, we see that a lot. But what I find very interesting is that as Jupiter is moving into, right now it's in Aquarius, and of course the new telescope has been sent out in space to find the Big Bang thing. The Big Bang thing, I personally do not really, subscribe to that at all, because astronomers and all that, they're absolutely lousy in their predictions. All these scientists, they say all kinds of things. Suddenly they discover another 10 billion galaxies, for example. I mean, they are completely clueless. You cannot depend on the words. As far as I'm concerned, a Big Bang does not produce suddenly all the cows and all the people and the human mind and everything. This is a tremendous amount of intelligent design out there. And right now, it's a very digital aspect as Jupiter is in Aquarius. But on December the 29th, just 3 days away, actually, from now, that I'm making this thing, it goes into Pisces. That's an extremely, extremely spiritual part throughout the year. And that continued throughout January. And that's what it's the analog and the digital combination that I see is such a beautiful combination. It's exactly Steve Jobs' chart. I made some of my best predictions when Steve Jobs was alive at that time about the Mac, and they were all based on one man. A lot of my world predictions about the rainforest and the iPods and all the things that will happen, and that was all based on his, and that whole energy is coming back and in full force in January of 2022. So it starts with a very exciting aspect, actually. Now, there are some accident configurations and certain times when there's mental stress and all that, and I'll deal with that now. By the way, with Saturn being the sign of Aquarius, the signs of Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius, they have a brand new major 7-year cycle which started last year actually, it started in 2021 and goes on throughout 2022 as well. That's the time to make major decisions. For example, long-term thing, whatever you're doing, think for the next 7 years rather than just a 6-month theme. Or they can come into a lot of delays and all that. It's just a test of your organizing skills that if they're in the right area at all. Now, on the 20th of January, there's a Mars-Uranus conjunction in the sky. It's one of the aspects of freak accidents and quite often in the aviation industry, and also the crypto. Let's be a bit extra careful at that time. Actually, it's 21st of January is exact. Some important days, there's a Mars-Pluto conjunction in the sky. People are a bit more violent at that time. It's around 28th of February exact. And in the sky, there's also Uranus-Saturn square configuration. This gives a conflict between the old and the new. But on the positive side, it's also practical, inventive ideas. But you're letting go of the conservative, the old themes, and also starting the new. So there's always a bit of an indecisiveness in this respect. On April the 5th, Mars starts off that Saturn. They're both in the sign of Aquarius. Again, for aviation, this is not a good aspect. Also for the crypto, it's definitely not a good aspect, including Tesla, for example, those type of companies, Amazon, Apple. This is not the best as major shakeups there. And the market, you've got to be extra careful at that time with any of the investments. So it's exact on the 5th of April, so a few days before and a few days after. The Mars-Neptune conjunction, the sign of Pisces, that's on May 19th. It's exact a few days before and after. This is an aspect of all the tornadoes and typhoons and any ocean-related things, or the shipping industry, for example. And it's affected at that time, or drugs, but especially ocean-related things and drownings and these type of things that you've got to be extra careful with that Mars-Neptune theme. It's a scandalous, fraudulent aspect, but especially to do with ocean. It'll affect certain people, and that I'm going to make a separate audio just for that. August, the beginning of August, is also another time when it's very volatile, but this is more for the real estate, land, property. There's a Mars-Uranus conjunction again in the sign of Taurus. It also squares that Saturn, so there's a major accident configuration again. So major authority conflicts, or the military part, for example. And by the way, around the middle of May, the first 2 weeks of May, it's a very interesting time when Mars, Neptune, and Jupiter are all together in the sign of Pisces, the most inspirational sign. Mars sort of corrupts it to some extent. That becomes a bit of a nightmare theme, and the drownings and all that's Mars, Neptune. But because Jupiter is also there, Jupiter, Neptune is an extremely spiritual, it's like a holy aspect. It has sort of an inspirational sadness to it, but it's also bringing a lot of people together in the concerts. But look into it in the first week of May. It's a very spiritual, a very special time actually. Some negative events, but also will bring people together, and very spiritual also. Another time when Mars squares that Neptune, this time is around middle October, that same nightmare period. And Mars is retrograding then at that time, and throughout the month of November also. So anything which has to do with communication breakdowns, because it's in the sign of Gemini, and goes just back and forth. And within that period, actually Mars is in Gemini right till March of 2023, actually, is continuously. They will also discover throughout 2022 some new forms of photography or holography, for example, will become much more prevalent. I think it may have to do with the Meta also. And instead of being just dependent on Oculus, which is owned by Facebook, hopefully others will come up with that. So those type of real experiences at a virtual level. But the holographic aspect of it in new computers and cell technology, for example, there are a lot of things being developed, for example, that you may not even know about that time. Because many of my predictions, I find that they happen a little bit later, the actual theme. But they've been in the laboratory, or they've done it, the prototype they've made, but they haven't come out in the public quite often. So these were some of the world predictions. I'll make another one for presidents and prime ministers and people in general for another one also. This is just the planets and the world where it's heading. And do subscribe to our channel if you like more. I wish you all a very happy and prosperous 2022. This is Hassan Jaffer, your astrologer, signing off.